Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
We're all set, cocked, locked. Here we go. Your dial is set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class today. We broadcast Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. through 11 a.m. Central Time. And Rick Miller's going to be with us in just a couple minutes. We're connecting with him now. A little bit of difficulty. And, you know, I've been mentioning on air that, what's wrong with America? And so our son went out, and I mentioned this a couple of days ago, that he went out and bought some soup, and he went to Aldi. And he can't buy just one of anything. He has to buy, like, a case or two. So he bought 2 cases of soup. And the interesting thing was that the soup was absent one of the ingredients, and it's Italian-style wedding soup. And so on this Italian-style wedding soup, it shows these little pearls of pasta, lots and lots and lots of them. And they weren't in the can. So it was soup without one of the ingredients. So he was kind of frosted, like, why does this can have so much broth in it and so few other ingredients? Well, so I called the telephone number. I had to look it up on the internet because normally it's on the can. Not in the case of Chef's Cupboard. And that is a brand of soup that it seems to be the house brand for Aldi, A-L-D-I, the discount supermarket, if you will. The only company that Walmart is concerned about, because Aldi eats Walmart's lunch when it comes to efficiency. They have fewer employees, and they can run their whole store on 5 or 6 employees. So even the store manager is stocking the shelves, sitting at the register, and they can get you in and out faster than any other operation. Well, normally they're pretty good, except with this particular soup that they sell, it's not so good. And because it's absent one of the ingredients. And I'm looking at our telephone line right now. It's tied up, the line that I'd like to use to dial 702-672-3280, which is the telephone number for Chef's Cupboard. That's their customer line. So if you have a concern, you can call that number. And I found it on the internet. It's not on the can. Normally, when it comes to food, the numbers are listed on the can. You can call this toll-free number between these hours, and we'll have somebody help you. If you call Kellogg's or General Mills or Progresso, there it is. Well, in the case of Chef's Cupboard, no, you actually have to go to the internet and look it up. So that's what I did. I looked it up, and let's see what happens. Redial.
By the way, I'm here.
Okay. Here's the number. I'm dialing Chef's Cupboard.
Thank you for calling the Chef's Cupboard. Please leave your name and number, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you, and have a great day.
That's it. So if you call Chef's Cupboard, you're going to get that message. And I've only been getting it for several days. So that's another thing that's wrong with America. Here we have a corporation, and it says it's one person. It's one person saying she'll get back to you. Well, that's a lie because, well, maybe she will. I can't say it's a lie. Hell hasn't frozen over yet. So she actually may get back to me, but doesn't seem like with any concern about urgency. So that's Chef's Cupboard. Do I recommend it? Absolutely not. Absolutely. It's crossed off our list. No more Chef's Cupboard. And maybe no more Aldi, because you can't call Aldi either. Rick, it's great to hear your voice.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to be here again and again. What's going on with Internet? I have noticed, I don't know for myself out here, the connections are very slow. Sometimes they're iffy, like they don't work at all.
There's a problem with the sun.
Difficult like that? How come I came on late today? What happened?
Well, that's what I want to know. No, I don't know, Rick, but Nathan.
Yeah, there's these big questions. Is it me? Is it you? Is it equipment? Is it internet? What is it?
This time it was on the network, and we were having a little bit of difficulty connecting with you, but we got it. But I was reading an article last night. I don't have it in front of me, but the sun has been acting a little weird. And
I can talk about that part. Yeah,
there's a problem with the observatory, and there are black helicopters flying over it, and they don't know exactly what's going on, but you can't get an answer out of, how come these guys went offline? And so I don't know, except the internet has been really flaky around here. I have to reboot the router over and over and over, at least daily. And, it used to be that you could leave that darn thing plugged in for months, even more than months, years, before you'd have any problems, but not anymore. So I don't know, our infrastructure is crumbling. Yeah. Rick, one of the things I was thinking about, I was complaining about Chef's Cupboard and, what's wrong with America. That's a company that you can't get to the customer.
What's wrong with America? What's wrong with it? U.S. Postal Service.
Well, that's another thing. You want to talk about those turkeys?
Well, I'll tell you what I do know. The U.S. Postal Service is most likely the only thing our government has ever done correct. And when they made it nonprofit, and today there is legislation to try to whack that down and make it, privatize it. And the people that work at the post office, even in the adversity of overwork, limited employment, etc., they still try to do the right thing. And I have observed other countries when their postal systems go on strike. Canada, for example, when Canada went on strike, I remember anything going to Toronto was sabotaged. Now that's all changed, but I remember that the employment was disgruntled and they were going to mess it up and cause a black eye. And the U.S. Postal Service, even in the adversity of all of this, individuals wouldn't even dream. There are individuals, Seattle, I can say that Seattle has a serious theft problem because I've personally experienced it. But beyond that, I'm impressed with U.S. Postal Service, and whenever I see any of them, I always wave because they are really one of the few agencies that are trying to do the right thing.
Well, I don't know, Rick. I'll tell you why.
There it is. Okay, good. Okay.
I'll tell you why. When we lived in Virginia, a member of our family would ship out packages, and they were very similar. And he was the highest volume shipper in this small post office. And one package would go missing, then two, then three, then pretty soon it was about 10%. And he had to go to a different post office to mail the packages because they were being stolen by the employees.
That's what I experienced in Seattle. That's the only place. Lexington is another big terminal point, Medford, etc. But it was Seattle is the only place in America that I've had problems, consistent ones, where there was no question there was theft. When I ship books, I do it cheapest rate, which is one of the things that makes U.S. Postal Service so cool. You can land a book at a nominal price, whereas if you wanted to ship to Canada or Europe, it costs as much to ship it as the book itself. That's why we do ebooks now. And I am impressed with that part, except that when you ship book rate, it allows the Postal Service to legally open your package and inspect to make sure you're shipping what you say you are. And I have no problem with that. What I have a problem with is when they take something out and put the package back together but not return the thing they took out to look at it. That's where I have a problem. And that only occurs in Seattle. And I have lost so many things up there that now they're setting up a special sting to try to capture who's doing that in Seattle, because apparently it's not just about me. I, at one point, was being, paranoid, thinking it was somebody trying to take me out, like Amazon. And I have justification on that, paranoia. But I now realize it's more than just me. And so something else is going on up in Seattle that's not right. And it's an embarrassment, because Seattle is where I grew up. I would have had hoped better pride. Yeah, that's a good word. In terms of how you ran your shop. Seattle doesn't give a damn about that anymore because of the influx of so many different creepy values. Amazon has set up their shop there. They just went to $1 trillion as the second largest corporation in the world. And I would love to see that Amazon drop to its knees and brought into true, antitrust, all of it.
Well, in Springfield, Missouri, there is a U.S. Postal Service hub. And I can tell you that when packages go in, they don't always come out. And we know this. And we also know that, we've been tracking some packages that have gotten lost. Our packages have gotten lost. And we know that they go into, they get scanned. They leave our post office, they go to Springfield, and they get missing. How's that possible? How is it they go in, but they don't come out? Now, the Postal Service...
Hotel California.
it is, yeah, except they don't, they're unionized, and the union will not allow cameras. Now, if they put cameras on these turkeys that are stealing our packages, that'd be kind of nice.
That's all different.
And then, yeah, so they won't allow cameras because it's not fair to the workers. But our packages are getting stolen, and we hate it. We absolutely hate it. So what customers now have to do is they have to overpackage. So let's say they're going to ship a small thing, let's say the size of a silver dollar. Okay? You can't just put it in a padded envelope. You've got to put it in a box. Okay? One that's really hard to tear apart so that one of these postal employees doesn't stick it in his pocket. Okay? So you have to overpack your package, which costs you more to ship it because the Postal Service turkeys are stealing it. Not all of them, but enough to make it very expensive to be in business to try to ship through the United States Postal Service through the Springfield hub. We know this for a fact. And we know that packages are going in and not coming out. And you're saying, well, it's gone. It's gone. Is it lost? No. It's stolen. That's the USPS. We'll be right back. Another thing that's wrong with America. Rick Miller's with us. DocRam.com. Also RichardAllenMiller.com. Richard, A-L-A-N, Miller.com. Rick, many years ago, I remember something that was a lot of fun. It was a great learning experience for one of our boys and me. And it was called the Pinewood Derby. This relates to physics. The very first Pinewood Derby was held in 1953 in California by a Cub Scout pack. And the idea was that you take a block of pine wood, a very small block of pine, and the dimensions were constant. And you'd get 4 wheels and 4 nails, and each one of these nails would act as an axle stub. And the idea was you could put the axles on this piece of pine, you could put the wheels on it, you could shape it, you could paint it, you could sand it, you could do lots of things to it, but there were certain rules that you could not violate. For example, the finished car must use all of the pieces, all 9 pieces that you got. The 4 nails for the axle, the 4 wheels that came with it, these little plastic wheels, and the piece of wood. Now, you could reshape it, you could paint it, you could experiment with aerodynamics, you could experiment with, making the weight toward the front, the middle, or the back. It could do some interesting things, and you could see how physics would be applied, the laws of physics, to your car. Well, my son and I experimented. And we, you get these nails, and we thought, you know what? I wonder if the wheels would spin easier if we lubricated them rather than have them run dry. We experimented with motor oil, like SAE 30. And we tried that, and we used a stopwatch, and we timed it. What we did was we built a ramp, and we timed this car that we built going down the ramp. And then we cleaned off the motor oil for the lubricant on the wheels, on the axles, and we tried Mobil 1, full synthetic oil. So we tried thicker oil, thinner oil, and our son and I learned what a difference that makes. Then we tried a dry lubricant, which was graphite. What a difference that made. Then we said, you know what? I wonder if there are little burrs on the axles themselves. I wonder if we could sand it down with very, very fine carborundum paper. Those little bumps on the axles. I wonder if that would help. And that helped. So we learned that dry lubricant, graphite, was the way to go. We learned that the axles would slow down the wheel with the little bumps in the axles, the manufacturing defects, if you want to call them that. And then we experimented with weight, putting the weight in the front, putting the weight in the back. We found out that, it was better if the weight was in the front. Then we tried something that I thought was pretty cool. We said, well, what would happen if this car actually had 4 wheels, but only 3 of them touched the track? And then we found out that it would go even faster if you could keep it going straight. So there are lots of challenges with this. Then we thought, how significant is aerodynamics in this? So you'd have something that looks like a Grand Prix race car, a wedge, versus a box or a school bus. We found out that, believe it or not, that didn't make as much difference as the lubricant on the wheels. And then we found out that what was really also important was the weight of the wheels. Now, there's no rule that says you can't reduce the weight of the wheels by removing material from the outer circumference of the inside of each of these plastic wheels. So if your wheels were lighter, you had more rotational efficiency. If your axles were smoother, you had less parasitic drag, right? And so we experimented and we learned all kinds of cool things that our son is applying to what he does on the farm today. Interesting. But, if when we went to the ultimate race, where my son's car that he and I worked on, and it wasn't like Dad built his car. It was like we worked on it and tried these things together. Did I know that thick motor oil would slow it down? Of course I did. But I wanted our son to see that, okay? So he experimented with that. But other dads, had lathes, and they could really make the car for their sons. And they did. And they looked fantastic. Way better than ours. But the sons really didn't build them. And if you wanted to, you could buy one ready to race for $200 as a kid. It's not fair, right? That's what happens. So we're talking about the Pinewood Derby as an example of typically a parent and a son in Cub Scouts learning about physics, learning about competing, learning about doing a better job, learning about doing the best you can, applying what you've learned to a competition. And so you don't have to be stronger in this particular race. You just have to be clever, and you have to be diligent, and you'll learn about gravity, because gravity powers these cars. It's as simple as that. So what you want to do is use gravity to your advantage and overcome some of the effects that will slow your little 9-piece project down. But, if that's too much work and you have lots of money, well, you can go to the internet and buy a car ready to go, complete car, ready to race for between $100 and $200. But that's not the point. The point is, well, that is, I guess, part of the point. Some people are doing that. So is that fair? That violates the spirit of the Pinewood Derby. The idea is father and son typically work together to build the vehicle that is going to be raced, and it's going to be their car, their design. They figured this out, hopefully on their own. So, Rick, we seem to have lost that kind of spirit in America.
Well, I can make some comments here. Yeah, I pulled off my bookshelf here. Yeah, I pulled off on my bookshelf here a thing from 1925. Now, mine's 23, excuse me. Woodland Tales by Ernest Thomas Seton. Seton was in 6 volumes. It's the birch bark edition. There were 6 volumes that later became a single volume Boy Scout manual. And this was in 1913, and then it led to 1923. And that's where I learned my wood lore. And going to Boy Scout camp, building racing cars, and the little boy mechanic, and the boy scientist. And today, the whole idea was where the father is acting as a facilitator and the child does his own learning. And that's where we have lost our children and the spirit of America, where the race car had certain kinds of designs on it because I thought it would be cool. Not just go faster, but look good too. And I wanted my racer. So when I was in Boy Scouts, I did Cub Scouts, I did Boy Scouts, I did Sea Explorers. And I remember when the Navy at Sandpoint, Washington, gave my troop 188, a 48-foot lifeboat. And the next 2 years, 14 of us, I think it was 14 of us, spent almost every day, just like Gibbs on NCIS, turning that old lifeboat into a 48-foot twin-masted schooner sloop rig with a centerboard. And we took that thing when we finished it in the outer straits from Seattle all the way up to Alaska. I was yeoman. Now that's the way Scouts used to be. It was a way of life. Yep. It was a way of being. Yeah.
And, the Boy Scout mottos, pretty good.
Thrifty, reverent, brave, obedient. Yeah. Good luck with that one.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Thrifty. And that's what we are here at this.
I remember when I was a young kid and I was at a crosswalk in Seattle, downtown Seattle, I would go across in traffic to help an older woman across traffic as a Boy Scout. It's different today. The values are different. The needs are different. The universe is different. And you can see that with what you were talking about, which is, customer service. This customer service is no longer there to serve you.
How about this hurricane?
Jeopardy, yeah.
How about this hurricane that's going to bear down on Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia, maybe even going into West Virginia. If you want to learn how to be thrifty, that's a great way to experience it. So many people are going to run out of almost everything, and someone takes a big gulp out of that water that you've got remaining, and there's going to be some problems, right? Rick, just for the life of me, I don't get it. I've been reading the stories about the internet, and people are going to Home Depot and they're buying plywood and they're buying water and they're buying water and they're buying more water and they're buying more water and they're getting gas cans for their generators. And the thing I don't get is how come they didn't do all this before? Before it was panic time. And how come people don't say, you know what? I think this storm's going to be really bad. The governor's saying there needs to be evacuations. The president's saying it's going to be a bad storm. The news is saying this is going to be terrible. People are going to die. There's going to be power outages for weeks, if not months. And people are saying, well, let's have another beer. I mean, I can't believe it. I just can't believe that people aren't smart enough to get out of the way.
Well, that's because they're not human.
I had a friend who...
I'm just kidding. Well, I have to wonder. I have to wonder. It's interesting
I have
to see that with law enforcement, all of it. Serve and protect.
He wanted to buy an investment property, in the Carolinas, on one of those islands. And he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "The sea level's rising. This thing's probably going to wash away in your lifetime. Depending on how long you want to keep it. Do you really want to do that? And so it might wash away tomorrow, literally tomorrow." So I don't think he bought it. It was a lot of money. And, I've been to the Carolinas. I've been to the islands there. And it's really nice to look at and get out of there. Because nothing lasts very long there. For example, if you need air conditioning, if you have a place on the coast, but the water is so salty that it eats the aluminum fins on your outside air conditioning unit. Okay? It eats the nails. So you've got to use galvanized nails, and they'll last for a while. People are building homes on stilts. I mean, 2-story stilts, which is crazy. Why would somebody build something up in the air that they know that they have to do that because it could wash away? Why do that? Why risk it? Why not move inland where the water isn't going to take down your buildings? I don't get it. I really don't get it. I think it's nice to look at the ocean and go home. But
well, that's why people drive different kinds of automobiles, and the two automobiles are equal in performance, and one is 9 times more than the other. That's my 280Z, but it was a Datsun compared to a 911 Porsche. And I could outperform it, and it was 9 times cheaper. Why would anyone buy a Porsche? Because status. It had nothing to do with practical. And that's something I see out of California values. People that, and when I say California, I live here in Grants Pass, Oregon, which is on the California border, and we were, or at one time, a bunch of survivalists, the Free State of Jefferson, the idea of the Ku Klux Klan and paramilitary and the rest of it. And then Californians started coming up here because the land was cheaper. And what happened next is I started seeing the way they drive of me first, rather than, like at a 408 stop where you have rules of engagement. And the value system of me first. I now understand why people carry weapons. I had a kid come up to me and wanted to hit me. And I dared him, because it isn't what I'm going to do. It's what happens next when they call it senior abuse. I've had enough of everybody and their values like that, and now I am challenging people. And I don't want to be like that. I don't want to think like that. I want to get along with everybody. But I remember the movie Mars Attacks, when, the president of the United States goes up to the alien and he says, "Why can't we all just get along?" And the alien cried and then laughed, killed him. And, it's, irony. That's what it is. It's irony. Values aside.
You mentioned. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
You mentioned Porsche.
Oh yeah.
Well, Have you been in our barn? You probably haven't.
Oh yeah, I've been in your barn. Yeah.
But
and beautiful. And you know what you got in there. All those Ferraris.
We still have. Well, we still have 3 Porsches left, and in our family, I'm talking about if you include my mom and my dad and me and our sons, we've had a total of 8 Porsches. There's 3 of them left, and we didn't have any of the middle range Porsches. We had the bottom and we had the top, and we bought them all used. And the prices when we bought them were ridiculously low. Let me give you an example. So my mom, my dad, and I all had Porsche 914s. Those were our first Porsches, starting at 1.7 liters, 1.8 liters, and 2.2-liter engines. And they were like $2,000. And they were great because they had Michelin tires on them, and they had skinny tires with a large diameter. Those tires on the Porsche 914s would last 100,000 miles. Literally. And the engines would go, I guess, about 300,000 miles. They were air-cooled. And if you changed the oil regularly, they were great. And you could buy them, use them for years and years and years, almost do no expensive maintenance to it, just regular maintenance, and sell them for more than you paid for them. I'll tell you the rest of the story when we come back. So Doc Ram and I are talking about Porsches.
I need to interrupt for a minute, if I could. I need to interrupt. Just something that just came across. The Alamogordo Observatory has just closed down for security reasons. This is a warning on what's about to happen with our sun. It just came over the news.
Talking about. Yeah, that's what I was talking about in the beginning of the broadcast. Yes. The sun. Mm-hmm.
There's something about to happen, and the Alamogordo one has just closed down for security reasons. They won't even say why.
Right, and there are black helicopters flying over it, and the feds will not release what's going on. That's correct.
I believe we are about to have an event. That's me saying it.
Rick, all right, I don't have an observatory here at the farm, but I do have some equipment that is measuring the solar output. And I've got to tell you that I've got a problem. We are generating, at times, when there's no clouds in front of the sun, between us and the sun, we are generating so much electricity through our solar panels that I have to increase the gauge of the wire because they physically get too hot now. And I've sized them correctly. So now what I have to do, and I have a fan running on our charge controller, which was controllers, which are designed to operate without fans to keep them cool so that they won't overheat and fail prematurely. So yes, something is happening, and we are setting records with the amount of electricity that we are generating here at the farm. While it's nice to generate lots of electricity, it's concerning to me. So back to the Porsches, I mentioned that I learned early on that if you buy an American car, it will lose value very, very, very quickly. But if you bought back in the 70s, when we started buying this type of in the 70s, the Porsches, used Porsches, like a 914, which was the entry-level Porsche, little four-cylinder air-cooled, removable hardtop. So it was kind of a convertible and a hardtop at the same time. Two people could lift off the hardtop in 1 minute, put it in the trunk, and off you go. What a great car, 30 miles to the gallon all the time. Wasn't all that comfortable, but it sure was fun and economical. Well, we'd buy them for around $2,000, maybe a little bit more, ride them for years and years and years, not have to do anything. Sometimes we'd have to put brake pads on them, certainly change the oil, but pretty much that was it, okay? And oil filter, of course. And they would sell for more than we bought them for. And right now, I'm looking at one of those Porsches, kind of like the one that I used to have, 1973, Porsche 914. I paid $2,000 for it. Right now, it's selling for $24,000. Another 1972 for $19,900. Those are asking prices. So here's one that's more reasonable, 1975 for $7,900. Now that seems like a lot of money for a car that used to sell for $2,000. So anyway, that's it for the 914s. And then we had some other Porsches, 928, which was their most sophisticated model at the time. And one of our boys, didn't want to buy a car. I didn't understand that. And then he said, I think maybe he was 18 or 19. He finally said, I saved up some money and I want to buy a car. And I said, okay, what are you thinking? He said, well, I found this really neat car. It's a Porsche. Okay, which one? 928. He said, but that's not what's really neat about it, Dad. It used to belong to Ross Perot. H. Ross Perot, the guy who ran for president. Well, he bought it. It's in our barn right now. So, yep, a 1970s vintage Porsche 928, one of the very earliest Porsches. And it's pretty cool. It's white with a buckskin-colored interior, and we've driven it for years and years and years. And, of course, it would sell for way more than he paid for it. Way more. Because he bought it for very few dollars. Why? Because nobody wanted it. Nobody wanted it. So Porsches, at that time, you could buy very, very inexpensively. So it's not like we've got millions of dollars in Porsches. That's not the case at all. But they keep going up. So is it better to put your money in the bank at 0.001% interest? Or is it better to put it in cars? Well, to me, yeah, the answer is kind of simple. I'd rather have an old collectible Porsche appreciating rather than having money in the bank, hardly doing anything. So we'll be right back. Doc Ram and I. This is USA Prepares. Everyone all set, cocked, locked. Here we go. Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Doc Ram's with us, Dr. Richard Allen Miller. Rick, as you were talking about during the first hour, as we mentioned earlier in the first hour, here's the article, dailymail.co.uk. Solar storm that could damage power supplies, knock out satellite TVs, and trigger auroras is set to slam the Earth's atmosphere today. That's what it says.
That's what I was trying to tell you. Heads up.
Yep.
Here we go.
And that was
I'm not
as
kidding,
of...
because the sun right now is in a solar minimum, which means that all the debris, the Earth does not circle the sun. The Earth tries to catch the sun in a spiral, and basically the sun is going through deep space filled with debris that it would normally absorb. Why it is in a solar minimum has to do with cycles of the sun, and that means that debris is no longer being absorbed by the sun, but going around the sun and hitting the Earth right now. And that's why the Earth is expanding, why the earthquakes are going off, and there are cracks and sinkholes everywhere. The Earth is expanding. And because of this debris that is hitting the Earth right now. And now the sun is going into a burp. And when it does, there will be geographical changes on the Earth. And that's where we are today.
Okay, so Rick, this article was written on the 11th. Okay, today is the 13th, 2 days ago. Now, it says fast-moving solar winds are created where the star's magnetic field opens up. Charged magnetic particles interfere with the machinery in Earth's orbit. They can also threaten airlines by disturbing the Earth's magnetic field. Do you think that the hurricane that is off the coast of the Carolinas, Georgia, and Virginia, that's threatening to pummel them, is a result of some of this? Could these be related?
Well, yeah, with the actual saline levels of the ocean right now, without ocean currents, are going to absolutely require a reboot, which is also affectionately known as the day after tomorrow. It's going to happen. It has to happen from a physics point of view. The Gulf Stream, just that alone. I remember less than 10 years ago when Europe had 9 currents. They don't have any currents today. All the currents have been delayed and stopped, and now the Earth must go through a reboot. That's it. That's physics. So here we are. I don't know how bad it's going to be. Probably won't be that bad. Won't probably be like the movies where the temperature drops so quickly that aircraft fall out of the air. But yeah, that's why Alamogordo and some of the others have. It's the thing about the Alamogordo one is, why is the FBI there?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Well, something is about to happen, and guess what? The news of the day is not keeping us up to date, so any of us really have a chance to have a better understanding of what might be implied and what might be needed for survival. And it's not right. It's not right.
So what we've done to ourselves is we've become dependent on machines, small microprocessing-driven machines. And, we can't find our way without them. I mean, who uses a map anymore? Right? Who uses a map? Who goes to one of those welcome centers in the state, in whatever state it may be, and get one of those maps that is printed courtesy of the taxpayers of that state? And, you keep it in your glove compartment. You want to get from here to there, you just take out the map and look. No, we don't do that anymore. We look on our smartphones, and the smartphone says, you're here, and we say we want to go to there. They go, okay, no problem. And it tells you step by step when to turn, when to get ready to turn, when you missed your turn. It tells you all those things. And the problem is that we have forgotten how to use maps. Just for one example. We've also forgotten how to spell. Heck, you don't need to know how to spell. You can just type along, and the software will correct your spelling for you. And sometimes it corrects it properly. Sometimes it thinks that the word that you've misspelled is a different word with a completely different meaning, and you sound like a fool because you didn't mean to say that, right? So I think we've become dumber with some of these electronic crutches that we have, like spell check. Heck, how many people can estimate today? How many people know how many ounces a cup is, or a pint, or a quart, or a gallon? How many people know that? Ask a young person. So how many ounces are in a cup? Let me look it up. Isn't that the answer? So, Rick, do you agree with that we are becoming less intelligent by shifting some of what we used to do in our own minds to machines?
How did Annie Lennox put it? I sometimes just forgets myself.
So Rick, is there a way that we can make? Is there a way that we can become smarter? Is there a drug that we can take? Well,
I have some smart pills I could give you if you'd like to try smart pills. I have some smart pills.
What would they do? Okay, if I took some smart pills, what would they do for me?
Well, they taste like shit. And that's how you get smarter.
What would they do?
Well, you missed the big picture, man. Smart pills. Start saying, hey, these smart pills taste like shit. Oh, you're getting smarter. Little rabbit turds. Is there... The whole thing is not about being smart. It's about practicality and being practical. And, there's all different levels of smartness. Women have different kinds of awarenesses that men do not. And you have to acknowledge the fact that intelligence comes in many different packages. And I'm one kind, there's another kind. There's lots of different kinds of awareness and smartness. And it's not like, well, he's smart. No, there's many different kinds. It's being practical that is what's lacking in millennials. Millennials today, for example, the kids, our young kids, are bright as anything. In fact, in some ways, I think they may be getting brighter than when I was in school. But they have no sense of practical. That's why your father worked with the boy in making a race car in the originals. That training of what is that called? Facilitating. And the practical of actually having done it and making mistakes. And that's what's lacking today. I would guess that a millennial is probably a better thumb wrestler than I'll ever dream of. It's crazy. The idea of technology making us such a level that we're lazy. Last night I posted something from Star Trek. The old Star Trek was communist oriented in that, today nobody has any personal property. We don't need it. Anything you want. We have a replicator. The idea that society is evolving to the point where we don't need things anymore. Good luck with that.
Okay, so I can't take a pill to make me smarter. There's no way. I gotta deal with what I got.
Well, yeah. I mean, the Jesuits used to whip themselves for being in error. They would whip themselves into a frenzy, and it would put them in an altered state that allowed them to do things they could not do in conscious awareness. And consciousness is not all that it's cracked out to be. And the fundamentalists that would believe otherwise are going in for a very rude awakening. And our planet is about to go through changes, and the good news is it's an opportunity for change.
So years ago, I made, it wasn't a science fair project, it was something that I built, I better not say because I don't know what the statute of limitations are on this, but I built this electronic device that would do some pretty cool things.
They just said a mouthful right then, man. I caught it all, too.
Yeah.
I don't mess up with buddy. It's up. Yeah.
Anyway, so I built this thing, and it was really simple. It used an LC circuit. It's also called a resonant circuit. It's a tank circuit or a tuned circuit. Well, it's a really simple electric circuit that consists of an inductor and a capacitor and a diode. Simple as that. And if you've got a bunch of these and you put them together, they could do some really cool things. Well, I've got another thing I'd like to try with this tuned circuit, and I know for a fact that I can create these frequencies in the range of 1/10 of a cycle per second all the way to 100, very simply. And I'm thinking that the delta frequency range is 0 to 4 cycles per second. That's the old-fashioned term, cycles per second. The new term is hertz. H, big H, little z. Theta is 4 to 8 hertz. Alpha is 8 to 12 hertz. Beta is 12 to 40 hertz. And gamma is 40 to 100. I know that I can make a really simple circuit that can generate those frequencies and put myself into alpha, beta, gamma, delta, theta. Would that do me any good, Rick? That's the question. So, Rick, if I can make this machine, which I know I can do, and I can generate frequencies in the delta, theta, alpha, beta, and gamma ranges, will I be able to do anything that's productive?
Well, that's the early training that made a Navy SEAL superior to the normal enlisted men, the ability to control and direct autonomic functions. Once you take ownership of your biological processes, things like healing, change to health, it is a whole new universe available as the next stage in the evolution of man's consciousness. When you talk about brainwave states, you're talking about a very narrow band of brain activity, usually associated in the occipital region of the cerebral cortex, biofeedback. But today, 45 years later, what I'm writing about, what I am experimenting with on myself, And I use myself as Exhibit A because I don't think of myself as being very bright. I recognize genius in a lot of other people, way beyond myself. I do. It's true. It's absolutely true. And with that said, what I'm doing now is I'm learning how to control the release of specific neurotransmitters with conscious direction in my brain. And what that's doing for me is showing me universes that I never previously had access to, where I can do things in those universes I cannot do in conscious waking state. For example, most of us, what distinguishes you from me is a wound. Something that happened to you, a girlfriend, a marriage, a situation with money, whatever, that has caused you pain and a wound and a change in your belief systems. Turns out that beliefs are arbitrary and that they should be used like tools in a toolbox. Now, there's many beliefs that are way more comfortable than other beliefs. For example, in America, most people want to believe in Christianity and the concepts of a savior. There are other cultures that have gone in a different direction and have functioned quite perfectly, one of which is the Essene Gospels, which is different than Christian, even though that's what Christ was preaching, was Essene. Now, with that said, these become tools when you can actually discern one point from another. And that's the problem. Most of us have considered altered states to be negative, that we don't want to, coming into and out of sleep, hypnopopnic and hypnagogic. But those places, going into sleep and coming out of sleep, are places where you can do things with programming yourself that you cannot do sitting at a table with notes all over your refrigerator telling you what and what not to do. Now, with that said, once you start to take ownership, it would turn out that a wound is what distinguishes you from me. That's what makes you and me uniquely different. And those can, in right action, be considered gifts from God. Because that distinguishing aspect between you and me, like anger, is a tool to clean a floor better than anybody else can. And once you understand the length, girth, and width of your limitations, they become blessings.
So what I'm learning about, Rick, is that if you have too high of a level of alpha, beta, gamma, theta, delta waves, you can cause problems. If they're too low, you can have problems. Like, for example, you can...
Like a gamma ray, if you're in gamma state, you could have burnout.
Yeah. So beta waves, as I understand it, are the get stuff done kind of mindset, state of mind.
That's associated with normal, conscious, waking state, right like where you are at this moment. Yeah. I have a whole chapter in Power Tools on this and how to use these, with the next chapter dealing with brain drivers and brain entrainment techniques using these beta frequencies and changing them to alpha or theta waves, where you have, let's say, 40 hertz going in one ear and 48 hertz going in the other ear, driving you into a middle theta state, which is associated with certain kinds of lucid dreaming. Now, theta is where your cell salts in your body are usually associated. REM sleep is alpha. usually where your eyelids, when your eyes are closed, are flickering. And that's because you're in what we call REM sleep and certain kinds of dream states. There are many different kinds of dream states, and they all have different functions. And most people think that dreams are associated with what they see in their dreams. And it's not that at all. As a matter of fact, dreams are mostly how your higher self talks to yourself. Hold on a second. My other computer just came on without my authorization. Somebody is taking control of it. Hold on. I have to turn it off. Hold on.
Okay. So what I've been reading about is these wavelengths, these frequencies. And beta is the get stuff done state of mind. And according to what I've learned, high levels in the beta world increase anxiety. You have the inability to feel relaxed. You have high adrenaline levels and higher stress.
Well, all of these things, I'm back. Yeah, somebody, by the way, just took over my computer. And from outside my thing, they just turned it on. How did they do that?
Well, don't get a smart refrigerator because they may lock you out.
I know. I've got the big picture on all of this. This is the so-called backdoors that Microsoft, etc., have put into our systems. Thank you, but no thank you. I wished I could get a Linux system that I could put on my system to make it a little bit more difficult. I now have a sweeper.
You can. I'm using Zorin, Zorin. I got a download copy. Well, no, it's free. It's free, and it's open
you'll need
source.
To send me links then. I would love.
I'll send you a link.
Yeah.
And
I'm at war with something, and when I say I'm at war with something, even when everything is going well, and I'm just now starting to feel things are starting to get changed, there is constantly something else reminding me that they have control of my length and girth and width. And it's pissing me off, and there's nothing I can do about it. It's like, it's very frustrating to become a person of interest and trying to do the right thing and getting validation and then having things go sideways because something does not want me to rest. They're stopping me from writing. I start to write something and my computer doesn't work. How's that work? I start to do something else, it works fine. Then when I try to do this, it doesn't. It's like there's something, you're spending a lot of time having to monitor me. That's costing somebody an attention. Now, let's go back to brainwaves. So what you have is God has given us a whole series of altered states of consciousness where in this state you can do something you cannot do in that state. And that's why you have them, so that you can become anything you choose, including Superman. And when I say that, most people, think I'm real bright or something like that. That's something I did on my own. I may have been gifted, blessed. We all are actually gifted and blessed. Each of us is different. What the key is to recognize and then containerize those differences so that you can use them as tools rather than distractions. An altered state, like daydreaming, is a wonderful place for creativity. And everybody knows that, and yet daydreaming is discouraged when someone is in class and the teacher up on the board is writing something down and you're looking out into the yard outside a window and you're in somewhere else. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? And the correct answer is yes. When used as a tool, that place can move you to the next level of consciousness that is man's divine right. And I'm exploring that now, like I explored controlling my heart rate, pulse, and respiration. Being able to do those with biofeedback saved my life. I was at sea, in the Bering Sea. I was alone. I had the pickup had been missed, and it was 42 degrees, the water. And I was going to die. And the only reason I survived was I learned how to take my heart rate down to a place where circulation changed. And I was able to drop my body's temperature down to a place where instead of having conflict with organs, I've now put myself in an altered state where maximum regeneration of healing could occur. And that's the ability to do that with conscious awareness is the distinctional difference, and is Chapter 8 on the ontology of mystical states. There is a hierarchy of going from a shamanistic state of consciousness into one of complete awareness of why you're doing something. And that is a exalted state of consciousness that I aspire toward now. And while I used biofeedback and brainwaves, that's where you start. That's the beginning. Then, once you've learned how to drop your heart rate, the doctor was in visiting the doctor, and the first thing they do when they bring you off the street is they cuff you and weigh your weight. Okay, now, that means your blood pressure is always going to be higher than it normally is. And mine was at 151 over 85. Over 85, 86, I think it was. And he said, Dr. Miller, I'm going to have to put you on meds and to lower that heart rate. You can't have that kind of a heart rate. And it pissed me off because he was going to fire me if I wouldn't take these meds. And I said, cuff me again. I just put it back down where he wanted it. I put it at 129. That's what I can do with my own mind. Now, once you can do something like that, that is controlling your heart rate, pulse, and respiration. That's the beginning of taking responsibility for your own evolution. And now I'm doing the same thing with the release of specific neurotransmitters. I'm trying to identify what the music feels like in my body when I get that chill going up my body, that spinal chill. That's dimethyltryptamine. Imagine what I can do if I straighten my back just right and I impinge onto the pineal gland. I can set up a resonant cavity oscillation in the neural cavity, and now I can regenerate nerve tissue, and wrote a technical paper on how you can do that using that chill. With that said, that means I can possibly choose what age I want to go back to rather than having to age.
I have a couple.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I have lowered my blood pressure by doing two things: consuming lots of water, filtered water, ProPure water, and fresh garlic. So I'll just chew fresh garlic. I don't have to worry about making friends. So I'll just chew fresh garlic and drink lots of water, and my blood pressure comes down. It works great. Of course, diet's important too, avoiding sugar and, avoiding, eating the wrong things. But those things, just garlic and water, can really help. At least they do with me. But I wanted to share something with you that I've experimented with sugar, and I believe that sugar causes nightmares if you have sugar before bedtime. So I did. I wanted to see. And I had some sugar, and I went to bed. And I had the most bizarre dream. And when I talk about bizarre, I mean something that I would never imagine, something that I would never think about, something that would never happen. Absolutely bizarre, frightening. And I'll tell you what it was. So in this sugar-induced bizarre dream, I was in our house. I was talking with Mrs. Finelli, and I was asking her, why the doors and windows are open, because the snow in the house is waist high. Why? How about closing the door? How about closing the windows? How about doing it like now, because, before the snow gets any higher? Now, it was weird because it was getting difficult to move in waist-high snow inside our house. Now, is that likely to happen? No. Have I ever thought about that happening? No. Do we leave the doors and windows open, in inclement weather? No. It's absolutely, totally something that I would never think about, and yet there I was in this dream state, I believe induced by sugar. I'm absolutely convinced because I've done it several times. And I have these really strange things, these dreams that I've never, ever had before in my life, never thought about. And they're one of a kind. Each one is different. I can only remember this one, but I know they're all different. But there's a situation where I can't get there from here. I'm stuck. I'm trapped. It's like I'm handcuffed. It's like I'm drowning. It's a situation that is formidable, difficult, almost impossible, if not impossible to get out of, and yet it's sugar-induced. Is that something that you have experienced, studied, read about? Can you tell us when we come back? Or is this just me, off on some strange expedition? We'll be right back. Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us. RichardAllenMiller.com. Richard, A-L-A-N, Miller, M-I-L-L-E-R.com. If you'd like to get power tools, you go to that website, RichardAllenMiller.com, and you can buy the book about brain drivers and thinking like a Navy SEAL. So, Rick, I experimented multiple times with having some sugar, not a lot, just maybe a heaping teaspoon before going to bed. And I've had these bizarre dreams. Is this just me? Or
No. Sugar.
As well, have you
sugar is, no. Sugar, that is how they started the cartoon Ricochet Rabbit. Ka-ching, 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 ka-ding, ding, ding. Watch a child on sugar. Just watch them as normal and just drinking one single soda pop, and then what happens next? All these chemistries are drugs, and they create altered states. And each altered state is unique. And the dreams that you have are going to other universes where the laws are different. And what most people do is they observe those, forget about them, move on, and fall into sheeple, states of consciousness. And what's interesting is when you notice yourself doing that, that's called, in the Bible, witnessing yourself, where you're watching yourself watch yourself. That is where evolution occurs. So there's a monitoring of yourself, and you're watching yourself and why you do this over that. You've got your little vector called sugar. You should be keeping a diary. That is a photograph, a magical memory of a snapshot of that moment, which is never going to happen again. And it's a way your future talks to the moment. And if you can form a dialogue with that, something remarkable happens. A language occurs, a way of how your higher self, God, talks to you uniquely, distinctly different than anyone else. And there is a book that I highly recommend called, written by Stephen Kaplan Williams, called The Jungian Sanoi Dream Manual, and how dreams can be used as tools. And once you begin to notice those dreams and how uniquely different they are from your experienced reality, and then you start to see a language occurs yes, this kind of diet, if I eat too late at night, then this is going to happen. If I do that, that's going to happen. And then you have a way to induce those places with conscious volition and use them like a tool. In this state here, you can, for a brief moment, have the strength of 10 men in just one moment. I watched a movie where Cassius Clay hit Sonny Liston. Sonny Liston went up in the air and fell back down on his back, out cold. And yet, when you take a closer look at the camera, Cassius Clay didn't even touch him. Now, that's called chi. I've seen that with Sifu, where they'll say, "Get away!" And the person just blows back in this force field that was created by the imagination of the other person.
As you were saying that, I was thinking about what I do. If I've got something I'm trying to figure out, I can't do it, I just can't get the right answer, I'll say to Mrs. Finelli, I'm going to sleep on it. I'll have the answer in the morning. And I sleep on it, and then I know. I come up with the answer. I got it. And I go, I should be writing this down. I go, no, I'm too tired. I'm not going to wake up and write it down. So in the morning, she says, do you have it? And I go, I didn't write it down.
But you still have it.
I had it.
You know why?
But
the Egyptians said it. You had
just can't find it.
Because you knew it.
Doc Ram, thanks so much for being my friend. Thanks so much for being with us on this broadcast, USAPrepares.com.